We see in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the leadership qualities that we need as an ummah today in our companies, in our communities, in our families. We need to have the voices at the table. We need to have the women's voices at the table. We need to have the youth's voices at the table. We need to have everyone's voice collectively to buy into the decision that we are going to make. जिससे मशवरा लिया जाता है उस पर भरोसा भी किया जाता है. Because the prophetic model is that leadership is based on trust, and trust can only be built when everyone's voice is at the table.
I just realized that 52% of our viewers have not subscribed yet. So अगर आपको हमारा content अच्छा लगता है and you believe in the cause and the change we're trying to create, subscribe to our channel and help us grow and become a part of the change that we're trying to create. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. माशाल्लाह इस खूबसूरत नात के बाद कोई और बात करने का दिल नहीं चाह रहा. But I want to share with you one of the essential qualities of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a leader. And that is that great leaders consult, listen and adapt to situations. हमें जब लीडरशिप की बारे में हम सोचते हैं तो हमारे जहन में ये आता है कि जिसकी सबसे ऊंची आवाज़ होगी, जो दूसरों को अपने इरादे पर मनवा सकता है, who can get others to do what he wants, that is a leader. Who has that aura that he silences everyone the moment he walks in, that nobody dares to say anything in front of his opinion. मगर नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने हमें ये दिखाया कि true leadership is not about silencing others. It's about amplifying voices. It's about inviting them to the table. It's about listening to them and including them in the decision making. और कुरान में अल्लाह सुब्हानहु व तआला मुसलमानों की, ईमान वालों की एक सिफ्त बयान करते हैं, व अम्रुहुम शूरा बैनहुम, कि उनके मामलात आपस में बाहमी मशावरत के साथ तय किए जाते हैं. And this comes in the surah that is named after this very concept, Surah Ash-Shura. And आम मुसलमानों को छोड़ें, कुरान में हमारे आपके नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम को हमारा रब यही हुक्म देता है. In Surah Al-Imran, it says, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam is commanded कि अपने सहाबा को अपने मशवरे में शामिल किया जाए. अगर पूरी तारीख में एक इंसान होता जिसको किसी और का मशवरा लेने की ज़रूरत ना होती, तो that would have been the person जिसको आसमान से जिब्रील अलैहिस्सलाम डायरेक्ट बराह रास्त खुदा का हुक्म, खुदा की हिकमत लेकर आते थे वही के तौर पे. So imagine somebody who's getting the divine message directly from the skies, and yet that God who is sending that message is telling him to do mashwara with his companions. That alone should tell us कि मशवरे की हमारे दीन में कितनी अहमियत है. And so, as Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala says, I never saw somebody more keen to consult his companions than Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And so this tells us, something really profound about leadership. That consultation is not weakness. किसी का मशवरा लेना, किसी से एडवाइस लेना, ये lack of leadership नहीं है, ये indecisiveness नहीं है, बल्कि this is actually the hallmark of being a true leader, to make everybody feel like they are heard, that they are part of the decision process. And the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam says in a hadith, ما خاب من استخار वला नदिमा मन इस्तशार. जो इस्तिखारे से एडवाइस लेता है वो कभी नाकाम नहीं होगा, और जो मशवरे के ज़रिए से मदद हासिल करता है वो कभी इस पे पछताएगा नहीं. And so let me put in front of you 3 stories from the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he puts this into action and he shows us that even at critical moments, when the stakes are really high, when failure is not an option, even then he does not make opinions without getting the help of his companions. So the first story is from the Battle of Badr. बदर के मौके पर जब कुरैश 1000 का लश्कर लेकर आए थे और सहाबा को आउट नंबर कर रहे थे by 3 to 1, एंड मुसलमानों का लश्कर जब पहुंचा बदर के मैदान में तो नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम अपनी सवारी से उतरे और एक पर्टिकुलर जगह पे मुसलमानों का कैंप बनाने के लिए तैयारियां शुरू की। तो एक सहाबी आए अल-हुबाब इब्न अल-मुंज़िर के नाम से, जो कि अंसारी थे, खजरज की ट्राइब से। एंड ही सेड, he asked a question, a very direct, very interesting question. He said, या रसूल अल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, ये जगह जो है, क्या अल्लाह ने आपको हुक्म दिया है यहाँ पे ठिकाना डालने का, या ये आपका अपना तजर्बा और अपना एक्सपीरियंस या अपनी ओपिनियन और अपनी स्ट्रैटेजी है? एंड जस्ट इमेजिन दिस क्वेश्चन, which one of us has the guts to step up to our sheikh or our teacher or the principal or the boss or the CEO and say कि जी ये वही आई है कि आप खुद ही अपनी मर्जी से कर रहे हैं, right? And this alone, the fact that this Sahabi was able to ask this question shows us that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was so open, so approachable. He felt comfortable asking him and giving him some advice. So बहरहाल the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam replies कि नहीं, खुदा की तरफ से वही थोड़ी आई है, ये तो मेरा अपना एक tactical decision है. So then Hubab says, then in that case या Rasulullah, ये जगह बेहतर नहीं है, हमें चाहिए हम थोड़ा सा आगे जाएं जहां बदर के कुएं हैं और उन कुओं को अपने घेरे में ले लें और बाकी कुओं को बंद कर दें और उधर एक तालाब बनाएं ताकि हमारे पास पानी का एक्सेस हो और कुरैश के पास ना हो. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepted this advice. He moved the entire army and he executed the plan of Hubab. And this became one of the reasons why the Muslims were successful in the Battle of Badr. So really, it's an amazing thing to think that a military general, right at the time of battle, is taking the advice of a common soldier. Because how many of you, be honest with yourselves, knew the name of this Sahabi, Hubab ibn al-Munzir? This is not Abu Bakr, this is not Umar, this is not Usman, this is not Ali. And yet a common soldier, his advice, his expertise is being listened to. So the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches us कि अगर किसी के पास कोई एक्सपर्टीज है तो एक लीडर अपने आप को हम्बल करता है, अपना ईगो मारता है और जहां से भी वो ओपिनियन आ रहा है जो काबिल अमल है उस पर अमल करके दिखाता है. The second incident is from the Battle of Uhud, when the Quraysh returned for revenge with an army of 3,000. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, उन्होंने सहाबा को जमा किया और मशवरा लिया कि कैसे हमें इनसे मुलाकात करनी चाहिए, इनसे मुकाबला करना चाहिए. And so there were different opinions. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his own opinion was कि मदीना में ही रहें और मदीना की गलियों और सड़कों को इस्तेमाल करें as the natural defense. But he saw that the younger Sahaba, those खास तौर पे जो कि बदर में शामिल नहीं हो सकते थे उम्र की वजह से या किसी और वजह से, they were now eager to prove themselves, अपना लोहा मनवाना चाहते थे कि अब ओहद में हम अपनी दिलेरी बहादुरी दिखाएंगे. And some other Sahaba, they were brave and they were, bolstered by the success of Badr, and they said हम इनसे मैदान में मिलेंगे. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam accepted and respected this collective opinion, even though it went against his own personal opinion. And he gave the order that we will march to Uhud and we will defend from outside the city. And as you all know, आप सबको पता है कि उहद की जंग में the battle did not go the way the Muslims planned. And बहुत सारे नुकसानात हुए, हज़रत हमज़ा शहीद हुए, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was gravely injured, and the Muslims suffered heavy losses because, in part, that some of the Sahaba disobeyed the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So after the battle, we don't see any record of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam criticizing the decision of the Sahaba or criticizing the opinion that they gave or saying I told you so or saying देखो मेरी बात नहीं मानते तो ऐसे होता है और देखो ऐसे नहीं और ऐसे नहीं और मैं तुम्हारे से दोबारा नहीं पूछूंगा. In fact, जो पिछली आयत मैंने आपको दिखाई थी वशाविरहुम फिल अम्र, वो इसी वाक़े के बारे में है कि अल्लाह हुक्म दे रहे हैं कि ए नबी जी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, आप इन सहाबा जिन्होंने गलती की इनके लिए इनको माफ़ करें, इनके लिए दुआ करें और आइंदा भी इनको अपने मशवरे में शामिल करें. So look at, the amazing zarf of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You accept collective opinion even when it is against your own. And you don't force your personal preferences upon your group. And you don't taunt them when things go wrong. These are the hallmarks of a great leader. And then the third incident is from the Battle of the Trench, Ghazwa Ahzab. And आप सबको पता है कि इसको ग़ज़वा अहज़ाब के बाद ग़ज़वा खंदक भी कहा जाता है. And this was when the Quraysh and their allies, the Jews, brought forth a force of 10,000 people to surround and siege the city of Medina. And at this situation, the Prophet ﷺ knew that we cannot meet them militarily, we cannot fight. So Sahaba se mashwara hua कि किस तरह दिफा करना चाहिए शहर का. And it was at this time that Salman Al-Farsi, the Persian, the Iranian Sahabi, he came up with this suggestion कि या रसूल अल्लाह, हमारे मुल्क में एक तरीका है दिफा करने का, एक गड़ा खोदा जाता है, एक खंदक खोदी जाती है और उसके ज़रिए से एक शहर का, एक इलाके का दिफा किया जाता है. So the Prophet ﷺ immediately accepted this suggestion and he told the Sahaba to dig the trench, and he took part in the digging himself with his own bare hands. And so he didn't say कि ये हमारा तरीका नहीं है. He didn't say ये गैरों का तरीका है. He didn't say कि we will not take this. ये क्या मैंने कभी नहीं सुना हुआ. He was not afraid to innovate. He was not afraid to adapt. He was not afraid to adopt new ideas. He was not afraid to listen to expertise once again, no matter where it came from. And so, the Prophet ﷺ in these 3 critical times in his seerah showed that consultation and mashwara is the way to go for a leader to make big decisions. And it's not just about big decisions either. ये तो मैंने तीनों जंगों के वाक़यात बताए ना, मगर नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की ज़ाती ज़िंदगी में भी वो अपने सहाबा से मशवरा करते थे. एक दफ़ा नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम की अज़वाज मुतहरात के साथ, अपनी बीवियों के साथ कुछ टेंशन थी, जिसकी वजह से वो अपने घर से भी दूर रह रहे थे, मस्जिद में रह रहे थे. And at that time, Hazrat Umar रज़ियल्लाहु ताला अन्हु came and gave the Prophet सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम some advice. And he said कि या रसूलल्लाह, ये मदीने की ख़वातीन को देख कर ना हमारी ख़वातीन जो है उन पे भी रंग चढ़ गया. And so he diffused the situation. And administration के तौर पे भी, he always used to include people in his मशवरा. मिसाल के तौर पे हुदैबिया की सुलह के बाद सहाबा were very very disappointed कि हम उम्रा नहीं कर पाएंगे. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told them to accept those conditions, and he told them कि अपने बाल शेव करो और अपना ihram उतारो. And the Sahaba did not do it. Can you imagine? And so the Prophet was upset, and he went into his tent and he talked to his wife, our mother Salama radiallahu ta'ala anha, and he said, they're not listening to me. And so she gave an advice and a suggestion, and she said, Ya Rasulallah, aap pehal karen, aapke piche piche baki bhi karenge. And this is exactly what happened. So in all matters, in all parts of life, the Prophet ﷺ gives us an example of a person who consults others and who brings all the voices to the table, and he makes sure that everybody is heard. And so, in conclusion, some of the lessons that we learn from the leadership of the Prophet ﷺ with regards to mashwara, the first one being that you should listen to expertise no matter where it comes from. You should have the humility to understand that you're not the most knowledgeable about everything, that there are people who might know more than you. और उनकी ओपिनियन को लेना एक लीडर की कमजोरी नहीं, बल्कि यही एक लीडर की स्ट्रेंथ है. And then to honor collective opinion and collective wisdom, even if it goes against your own personal preferences. Because a leader in Islam is not a dictator. A leader is one जो कि अपने रियाया की opinions को साथ लेके चलता. And then a leader is one who adapts to changing situations and who innovates and is ready to take the new and the brave and the unknown and the bold and is not stuck in his own ways. So we see in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam the leadership qualities that we need as an ummah today in our companies, in our communities, in our families. We need to have the voices at the table. We need to have the women's voices at the table. We need to have the youth's voices at the table. We need to have everyone's voice collectively to buy into the decision that we are going to make. And so, I leave you with the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, "Al-mustasharu mu'taman." जिससे मशवरा लिया जाता है, उस पर भरोसा भी किया जाता है. Because the prophetic model is that leadership is based on trust. And trust can only be built when everyone's voice is at the table. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.